This section goes on for an upsetting long period of time, involving, and eventually, which I won't read today, involves a trans character by the name of Michael Parker, whose entire story is told through tweets only, which to me sends a very specific message about our stealing and taking away the narratives and lives and voices of people who are not like ourselves, especially in social media. And that includes not just people we disagree with and morally don't agree with, like many people on the right and the alt-right, but even our own, even, you know, whether it be the Women's March or, you know, a musician that we love, or me. So it's a sort of indictment of looking at our social media culture. I think the last piece I'll read, yeah, I'll read this today. Roughly 10 years go by and this woman is never caught. That is a spoiler, but it's not really, and you'll see why. Donald Ellis, you know, becomes this sort of very powerful voice in the world. He becomes almost like a John Walsh. He has his own radio program, very popular radio program, where he is out there really helping to catch predators in a certain way. And so this is a piece that he writes, an op-ed that he writes in a paper that's akin to sort of the New York Times, called the Prospect Times. This is an opinion, January 14th, 2026, an invocation by Donald Ellis. This is an opinion page, but what I'm here to say is not an opinion. It is an offering. It is a letting, a delayed release, an invitation to the beginning of who you are through the end of what you were. My name is Donald Ellis, and I am not a survivor of rape. I did not survive. I perished before pushing through. I had to end before I could begin again. My name is Donald Ellis, and I am not a victim of rape. I am an assault's legacy, an embassy of explorations. I am the remnant of memory, collateral debris. I am an earned epilogue. 10 years ago, I was having beer with a friend after work, and a few hours later, I was violently assaulted and left for dead behind a dumpster. No, worse. I was left for living. My assaulter wanted me to live through what I had experienced. It was a gesture of torture, a most excruciating gift. I became suicidal. I told myself I did not deserve love, my children, my wife. I was in isolation of shame. A pending avalanche, I was blood outside of its body. Many times I have asked myself what I could have done to protect myself that night. I asked myself if I had deserved this, and I convinced myself that I did. And it wasn't hard to. I live in a country built on celebritizing its citizens' grief and amplifying stories of violence and assault for political gain, click counts, or television ratings. Let me be emphatically clear. They don't care about us. People who live through sexual assault are a crash on the side of the road. And the American media is nothing more than cars slowing down just long enough to take a peek, just long enough to take a picture before speeding off to their next fatality. We are a country that capitalizes on the fetishizing of felonies, a country that says innocent until proven guilty, even though the proving of assault is nearly impossible. You tell me how you prove coercion, how you prove the difference between being hit on and hunted, how you prove your arms were held down, your body was touched, your life was threatened, if you ever told anyone. For people who have suffered violent sexual crime, proof, the very act of proving, is more than just a burden. It is a boundless bearing, an eternity in futility.
How are you?
I'm not one for witchcraft, but I believe in the power of spells. It is not the one I came here with, but it is the one I will leave here in. I will take care of it. It belongs to me now. My pain, I will take care of it. It belongs to me now. My heart, I will take care of it. It belongs to me now. My story, I will take care of it. It belongs to me now. I experienced death, but I am not a seasick. These hands remain sorcerers. This mind contains many moons pulling gravities. Every memory is an ocean, every remembrance a tide, and I have the right to recede. And I have the right to swell. And though I am estranged from the sun, I am a brightness lit from within. With this voice, I cast out the shadows, my forced curse, my executioner's oath. I cast out the crime of me, my casualty. Silence, you must leave. Sadness, go. Surrender, shame. Cruelty, quiet now. Only light now. Flare now, glow now, radiance now. Beam now, blaze now, spark now, gleam now, grow now. I stand with you as you stand with me. Amending between us and before us. This body is our own. It belongs to us now. My pain, I will take care of it. It belongs to me now. My heart, I will take care of it. It belongs to me now. My story, I will take care of it. It belongs to me now. Ending, elapse. Beginning, come. Edward from the Dispatch newspaper. Hi, Maud. My name is Edward Altman, and I'm a reporter for the Dispatch newspaper. A former journalist for the Dispatch by the name of Joshua Greenfield reached out to you for comment almost a decade ago. And while he no longer works for the paper, I wanted to circle back now that so much time has passed and see if you would like to give a statement or comment regarding the recent allegations of Ezra Fisher, who came forward with a physical description of you, which has, of course, reopened the case. Is there anything you'd like to share with the public, Maud? Maud is offline. Maud is now online. Thank you very much. So is there any just kind of, I think, a good overview of what the book encompasses. There's a lot more, obviously. But if anyone has any questions about the novel, the writing of it, anything else, I'm here if we do your thoughts, questions. Yes?
Hi. My sister introduced me to your book. She read it, loved it, gave it to a friend, bought another copy. I read the whole thing in one sitting on the 4th of July by myself.
I keep hearing that. God, that's been a lot to digest.
It was very dark. I had very dark dreams for several days afterwards. I was just wondering how it affected you while you were writing it, because I think I read that you wrote it over a period of time. How did you compartmentalize and deal with that heavy stuff while going about your day-to-day life?
Yeah, so the question is about writing the book and compartmentalizing and processing, and how you write something like this, what it does to the central nervous system and other things. It was tough. I started writing this book. I came up with the idea at the end of, I think, 2014, 15, something like that. And I started writing it predominantly at the end of 2015 and all through 2016. So I wrote it while I was during that particular election in 2016 while pregnant with my daughter, which was its own sort of wild experience. I don't think I probably could have gone as deep as I did in the book if it weren't for the fact that I was pregnant with a girl during that particular election, which I think created some kind of violence periphery in which I felt like I could see further than I had ever seen before, I guess, some idea like that. And the book was actually finished in the middle of 2017, about 4 months before the whole Me Too movement happened. So when people often say, how, the piece that I wrote for the New York Times, I'm done with not being believed, I think that's what it was called, but that actually came a few months after finishing this book, and it was living in my head, and anger was living in my head, and frustration from not figuring out how to get more people, predominantly cis white men, to hear stories outside of their own. Not just to hear and sympathize, but to have empathy, to empathize and to really understand anything on a deeper level outside of their own experience. With sort of Donald Trump, I think, being the cherry on top of that white cake. And so for me, it was really an exploration in how to get people to listen. And I think that's the connection between this and that piece being written just before the Me Too movement just sort of broke. I think that stuff happened because of this book. And it definitely took its toll. I mean, at one point I had like bilateral carpal tunnel and Decker vein syndrome in both hands, which I'm actually writing about right now for a book of essays. So I had to stop for like 9 months while I had it. I could wear these gloves made for me by physical therapists, and all I could use were my fingers. A lot of pain surrounding that part of my life because I also couldn't breastfeed. So my milk like dried up pretty immediately. It was devastating. So fun being a woman. We can have it all, you guys. Just have it all. So yes, it was tough.
I'm sure it was tough.
Anybody else? Yes.
So I recently have been starting performing and writing comedy, and I know that you have some experience with that. I love your work in Inside Amy Schumer. But I find myself when listening to your other comedians and also trying to write about the Me Too movement myself, I find myself getting nervous about it kind of losing any impact because it's being kind of joked about or talked about in a lighter sense. I was wondering if you had any experience or thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the question is about, we have a budding comedian in the room, which is very exciting. No, I'm calling you a budding comedian. When I see your Netflix special someday, I'm going to be like, I knew her. Talking about sort of informing how we talk about some of these more difficult conversations, especially politically and within the body and the idea of the Me Too movement in comedy. Have you seen Hannah Gadsby's special?
Not all the way through yet.
Okay. That is a study in one of the most extraordinary pieces of art I think that has ever been made cinematically. I would include that in film. I know a lot of comedians who don't agree with that. Not my husband, he also thought he blew his mind. But I know a lot of comedians who are like, it's not comedy, it's a TED conference. Like they respect it, but they respect it as a TED conference type thing. Like it feels like it's more speaking directionally. I think it is so important for each of us to be able to figure out a way to talk about things in the way that we are uniquely primed for and that we uniquely can understand without harming other people in the process of that. And I think what is so amazing about what she did in that special, and then I know Carmen Esposito has a special out too, which I haven't seen, but someone else told me. I think it's called Rape Joke. Does anyone know? Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I can't wait. I refuse to watch it on my computer because I think that's rude. I always like it back to my TV. But so I think that there's some really dynamic comedians that are writing about things right now. And I do know, like for instance, in this book, there is a character named Per O'Sullivan that in the audiobook Mark Maron did the voice for. And Per is a sort of struggling New England, uptight, very emotionally closed off comedian who never really made it in a big way, though he's funny. And he also is, I think he's one of the only two that really experienced violent sexual assault in the book, as far as physically. And his way of processing it is to make jokes about it. In totally inappropriate jokes. It's his way of grieving. And I think that is a reality for some people. I think everyone has a different process, a different way in which they want to tell their story, that they feel comfortable telling their story, which also includes not telling your story ever, and that is also a totally fair choice. So I think I would hesitate to give comedic advice because I'm not a comedy writer or a comedian, but I think that you will naturally know probably what your work is, what your capacity is, and what your particular strength is as far as a comedian. And fuck everyone else. Fuck everyone. Anyone that tells you it's not good, it's not right, you gotta just remember that has been the experience of women forever. It's just middle fingers forever, all day, every day, in order to get anything done. Yes?
The last time we were here in Richmond, we were reading from your book of poetry.
Yeah, Dark Sparkler.
Yeah, Dark Sparkler. And I was struck by like how lyrical what you're reading today, as I haven't read the book yet. I was wondering, like, did you always know that this was going to be a novel, or has some other form, or?
Great question. Yeah, so the question is about the last time I was here, I was reading from Dark Sparkler, which was my last book, which was a book of poetry, which looked at the lives and deaths of child star actresses, both real and then some imagined. I've been a poet my whole life. I grew up around a lot of poets. So the question is really about how that informed this book potentially, and did I know that this was going to be a novel, this story? It was actually the editor of Dark Sparkler, a guy at Harper Perennial, who's now at Riverhead. His name's Cal Morgan, who put the idea in my head and said, I think you should write a novel in 2014. And I sort of sat and thought about it for a long time, and I actually attempted to write the first 2 chapters of this book in 2015, and I gave them to him, and he was like, these are not good. This is pretty bad. This is pretty not good writing. And we sat down, and I had a really profound realization while talking to him. I mean, I would consider him one of my great mentors as far as shaping a lot of my thoughts and my ideas about what I was allowed to write and how I was allowed to write it. And he said, what I gave him, he said, felt like I was trying to write like what I thought a fiction writer sounded like. And he said, you are not using the voice that you uniquely have, which goes back to your thing as well. And he's like, you have a gift with lyricism, with poetry, and that is something that you need to use. It's, there are other people that spend decades working to get that. And that's true for anyone. It may not be your poetic, lyrical voice. It could be anything else. So really use that and hone in on that craft. And then I was like, oh, it kind of freed me to think outside of the box of saying, fiction can be very different. There is no particular guide or rule for the most part, if you're messing around and playing around with prose and fiction. As far as a novel is concerned. So it definitely did inform it, and I think once I had that freedom, the book came very naturally. And I remember one of the things he said, when I gave him those 2 chapters, he said, did you enjoy writing this? And I said, no, I fucking hated it. It was so boring. And he said, well, you better believe that if you're bored writing it, the reader is bored reading it. And that shaped everything. He said, so do what brings goosebumps onto your body. That is what will translate to the reader. Yes?
I just got my published notes back for my first book that I'm writing.
Awesome.
Congratulations. Thank you. And I'm a mom of 2 small kids. And I have recently noticed that my process since becoming a mother has become a lot longer in order to get to that place in my mother.
So this is about, by the way, she has a book coming out, so give it up. Talking about process and writing while also being a mother. The process for me being pregnant was, I felt like I was explosive with creativity. I still feel that to a certain level. I feel I'm in a bit of a prime. I don't know what that'll look like someday. That doesn't change the fact that I am exhausted 24 hours a day. I am put my daughter down for a nap. Then I quickly lay down for a 20-minute nap. I've got it down to a science because I know she sleeps an hour and 45 minutes in the afternoon. So I get 20 minutes to nap. I get 5 minutes to have tea or coffee to wake up, do emails, and then I maybe have a solid hour to write, which we all know ends up being bullshit with 5 minutes of that. Making every excuse. You will literally do the laundry twice to avoid writing sometimes. So I don't think it's ever easy. I do feel like it's different. But my writing mentor is a woman named Wanda Coleman, who's an amazing poet. She's no longer with us, but. One of the things I loved is she always would say, this idea that everyone writes every single day and that's how you become a good writer is bullshit. For every writer, it is totally different. The experience is totally different. Some writers, in order to be good, they need to do that. That is an exercise, the discipline that's important. Other writers sit and digest in their heads, and they grow in their heads. It is like growing a child in a certain way. And that you have to, the thing she said specifically was, she doesn't believe in writer's block, and that you have to let the muse sleep. And when you're not writing, that's the muse resting. She's absorbing. She's getting ready. And to use that time to think of that as also part of the writing process. The writing process is not just the writing itself, it is everything you are absorbing at the same time. And sometimes it takes years. And I think the more pressure we apply to waking the muse up and being like, you gotta write now, doesn't help necessarily. So that's part of that wisdom that she gave me. And that freed me because I had 2 writing mentors growing up. She was one. Jack Hirschman, who's the poet laureate of San Francisco, was the other. And that dude writes every day. He goes to an office, writes every day. He speaks 13 languages. He translates. And I grew up always thinking I was doing it wrong. Yes, that's right. And I felt like, it was different for me. And so once Wanda gave me that other idea, it freed me as a writer in a lot of ways. Okay, maybe I'll take, what time is it? Maybe I'll take one more question. Anyone has one? Yes.
You mentioned the audio, which I also listen to, and you can get through Libro FM through Fountain Bookstore.
Ooh.
I just wanted to know what your experience was with the audio because it's such a great cast. So it's just, what was your experience?
So the question is about the audiobook and my experience with it. I haven't listened to it. When I just recently did Mark Maron's What the Fuck podcast, he was like, so what'd you think? I was like, you were great. You killed it. Mark. And I did tell him, and he was like, are you fucking kidding me? You haven't listened to it? and I hadn't sent him the book. I'm like garbage. I'm like a dumpster flame pile. I have heard very good things, and I will say that I sat in on Ben Foster's reading. Ben Foster voiced Donald Ellis, that character that I read you. So I got to hear him, and he is sort of the main protagonist in the book. Not really. There are 5 of them, but I would say he's the through line in a large way. And it's hard to describe the way that it felt. It was very emotional, and it was very profound and amazing. And I was very lucky to have, actors like Ben Foster and Jason Ritter, and this wonderful actor we have in New York, Len Davis, who's a phenomenal, came out of Steppenwolf, and Mark Maron, and John Roberts, who's the voice of Linda on Bob's Burgers, if anybody watches that show. So just some really talent. Oh, and my dad is also in it. For like 2 seconds, and I'm also in it. So it was really enjoyable. I think I've been waiting to be able to sort of savor it because I've also heard it's produced really well. So I'm just gonna wait until I find the time to like properly absorb that piece. Yeah. Thank you so much, you guys, for being here. If we're signing books, where do you want to do that? Do we do it here?
We get the table from the back.
Okay. I can also just do it here, but whatever is best for you guys.
It's okay. You want to stand or you want to stand?
I think I'll stand.
Stand face down.
And I'll put this on so I'll get the credit on my iWatch. iWatch will be like,